Welcome to the Female Church Leaders Podcast, a weekly resource for women who love God, love the church, and are called to lead. I'm your host, Kadi Cole, church leader, author, and executive coach. After more than 30 years in full-time ministry, often as the only woman at the table, I understand how meaningful yet challenging your calling can be. That's why I created this podcast, to remind you that you're not leading alone. Each week, I'll share practical tools, biblical insights, and honest encouragement for the real challenges female leaders face in ministry, so you can grow your skills, strengthen your faith, and lead with more confidence and joy without burning out or striving to prove yourself. We drop a new episode every Monday because Sunday is coming and you are going to be ready for it. Have you ever had a season where nothing was technically wrong, but everything just felt heavier than it should? You're still showing up. You're still doing the work, but the energy you used to have, the clarity, the sense of purpose, it feels like it's just faded a bit. And if you're leading others, you've probably seen this in your teams too. The volunteer who used to be all in, now they're just going through the motions. The staff member who was proactive, now they're just waiting to be told what to do. The leader who used to bring energy into the room, now feels quieter, maybe even a little disengaged. Here's what I want you to see right from the start. Motivation isn't random, and it's not something you either have or don't have. Motivation follows patterns, and when you understand those patterns, you can lead yourself and others back to clarity and energy much more quickly. So let's define what we're actually talking about. Motivation is not just emotion. It's not hype. It's not personality. Motivation is the internal drive that directs your energy toward meaningful action. And here's the leadership insight I want to highlight. When motivation dips, it's usually not because someone suddenly became less committed. It's because something in their environment or their leadership stopped reinforcing the reasons they care. This is where clarity helps, because instead of reacting to behavior, we can start leading what's underneath it. There's a body of research that's been incredibly helpful in understanding this. Psychologists Dici and Ryan developed what's called self-determination theory, and it's been widely used in workplace research, education, and leadership development. At its core, it says that human motivation is fueled by a few key psychological needs. And when those needs are met, people naturally engage, contribute, and grow. When they're not met, motivation drops, sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly over time. I want to simplify this into 4 clear elements that you can actually use in your leadership. And to help make this stick, I want you to picture motivation like a bonfire. Not a big dramatic bonfire that's burning down lots of stuff, just a steady, consistent fire that keeps warmth and energy in a room. That fire doesn't sustain itself. It needs fuel. And these 4 elements are the fuel. When one of them is missing, the fire doesn't go out immediately, but it does start to weaken. If multiple elements are missing, you really start to feel it. So here are the 4 elements that fuel motivation. Number 1, meaning. Does this matter? People are motivated when they can clearly see that what they're doing has purpose. Research consistently shows that perceived meaning in work is one of the strongest drivers of engagement and performance. And here's what I want you to see. People don't just need a mission statement. They need a connection between their role and real impact. If that connection gets fuzzy, motivation starts to drift. Number 2, ownership. Do I have agency here? This comes directly from autonomy research. People are motivated when they feel a sense of ownership, not control over everything, but meaningful influence over their role. When everything feels dictated, when there's no room for initiative, when individual creativity is stifled, motivation declines because people don't just want to be used, they want to contribute. Number 3, progress. Am I growing or moving forward? There's strong workplace research, especially by Teresa Amabile in her book, The Progress Principle, that shows one of the biggest drivers of motivation is simply seeing progress. Not massive wins, just forward movement. When people feel stuck or like their effort isn't leading anywhere, motivation starts to erode. And number 4, connection. Do I feel seen and valued? Humans are relational. And this is especially true in volunteer ministry environments. When people feel known, supported, and connected, motivation increases. When they feel invisible, disconnected, or overlooked, motivation drops. Meaning, ownership, progress, connection. Think of the fire metaphor again for a moment. Meaning is the spark. Ownership is the oxygen. Progress is the wood. And connection is the warmth that keeps people close to the fire. If you're missing one of these, again, the fire weakens. But if you're missing multiple, people don't just lose motivation. They start questioning while they're even there. Now, here's where this really becomes important for leadership. Most leaders respond to low motivation in their team by trying to increase energy, more encouragement, more vision casting, more urgency. But if the fuel is what is missing, more energy doesn't fix the problem. This is where the shift begins. You don't lead motivation by pushing harder. You lead motivation by restoring what fuels it. I remember a season in my own leadership where this became very real to me. As I stepped into higher levels of leadership, my role changed. I was in more meetings, more strategy, more big picture thinking, but I had less interaction with individual people on the front lines of ministry. And I started to notice something. I was less motivated, not because I didn't care, not because I wasn't committed, but because one of my key motivators, connection, was no longer consistently present. And it showed up mostly in subtle ways at first. I had less energy. I felt a little more detached, and at times even a bit cynical. And I remember noticing another pattern. If my leader bumped our one-on-one meetings too many times in a row, I would also feel it almost immediately. I'd start to think, does any of this even matter? Is what I'm doing actually important? Nothing had technically changed, but my sense of connection and meeting had been disrupted, even though my calendar was still filled with lots of people. It wasn't just people I needed. I needed connections with the right people to nurture my motivation. This is where clarity really helps, because when motivation dips, instead of judging ourselves or others, we can start asking better questions. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in real life with your team, because motivation dips rarely announce themselves. They show up as symptoms. In others, it might look like decreased initiative, slower follow-through, less creativity or engagement, increased frustration over small things, or quiet disengagement rather than open resistance. And sometimes the most faithful people are the ones who slowly drift away. Not because they don't care, but because their fuel hasn't been replenished. And in ourselves, it can look like feeling unusually tired or heavy about work, losing excitement about things you used to enjoy, questioning whether your work matters, feeling disconnected from people or purpose, or subtle cynicism creeping in. Here's what I want you to see. These are not just emotional fluctuations. It is not hormonal. These are leadership signals. They're telling you that one or more of the 4 motivation elements needs your attention. If you've experienced this, remember, you're not behind and you're not failing, but it is time to do something different. Before we lead this in others, it helps to recognize it in ourselves first. Let me give you a simple way to do that. When you feel your own motivation dipping, ask, has meaning become unclear? Have I lost a sense of ownership? Am I not seeing progress? Am I disconnected from people that matter to me? And then, and this is key, don't just notice it, do something about it. For me, I had to intentionally reintroduce connections into my leadership rhythm. For me, that meant being present with people on the front lines, working at the prayer altars at least once or twice a month, and I even started leading a new believers small group at my campus, just as a volunteer, protecting one-on-one conversations with my leader and communicating my need to meet with him regularly, and re-engaging relationally when I felt depleted, not just strategically. You will probably need a different strategy, but the point I want you to remember is this: sustainable ministry requires sustainable leaders, and sustainable leaders pay attention to what uniquely fuels them. Now, let's bring this back to how you lead your team, because this is where building motivation becomes incredibly practical. You don't need a full leadership overhaul to address motivation. You can start this week, especially in something as simple as your volunteer team huddle or next team email. Imagine you're gathering your team before a service. Here's how you can naturally hit all 4 motivation elements in just a couple minutes. First, meaning. Hey, everybody. What we're doing here today matters more than we always see. Every person who walks in here is carrying something, and how we serve them helps shape their experience of church and even their experience of God. Second, ownership. You each play a key role in that. You're not just filling a position, you're leading in your area. Pay attention to what you notice today and take initiative where you can. Third, progress. Last week, we saw 3 new families come through, and many of you helped create that welcoming environment. We're growing, and what you're doing is working. And fourth, connection. I am really grateful for this team. The way you show up consistently, it really matters, and I want you to know I see it. That's it. 4 elements, a few sentences, real impact for every person on your team. Remember, motivation isn't something you chase. It's something you cultivate. And when you consistently reinforce these 4 elements, you build a culture where people don't just show up. They engage, they grow, they stay. Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Scripture doesn't just acknowledge our work. It acknowledges the weariness that can come with it. And that matters, because so much of what we're talking about today is what happens when motivation begins to dip over time. Not because the work isn't meaningful, but because the harvest isn't always immediate. Motivation often weakens in the gap between effort and visible impact. When leaders or volunteers don't see progress, when meaning feels distant, when the connection between what they're doing and what God is doing becomes unclear, it's easy to grow weary. But this verse reframes the entire experience. There is a harvest. There is meaning. There is movement, even when you can't see it yet. And this is where the shift begins. As leaders, part of stewarding motivation, both in ourselves and in our teams, is helping to close that gap. We remind people why this matters, where God is at work, that their faithfulness is not wasted. Because when motivation is tied only to immediate results, it becomes fragile. But when it's anchored in God's faithfulness and His timing, it becomes steady. So the invitation here isn't just to push through weariness, it's to lead through it, to keep bringing your team back to what is true, even when it's not yet visible. Because faithfulness, over time, always produces fruit. And sometimes, one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader is help someone remember why they started in the first place. So here's your action step for this week. At your next team meeting, a staff meeting, volunteer huddle, or even a quick check-in, ask yourself, how can I intentionally include meaning, ownership, progress, connection in just a few minutes? You don't need a speech. You just need to clearly speak to what will rebuild motivation in your team. And as you lead this, remember, you can care deeply without carrying everything. You can lead faithfully without manufacturing energy. And you are not responsible for creating motivation in others, but you are responsible for cultivating the environment where it can easily grow. As we close, I want to point you to a resource that will support this kind of leadership even further. We've created a resource on the emerging trends in leadership development, which is a workshop I teach to church leaders at conferences and cohorts around the country. You can download it for free to help you stay ahead of what's shaping healthy, sustainable leadership in church leadership pipelines right now. You can find it in the show notes. And as always, if this episode encouraged you or helped you think differently about your leadership, I'd love for you to share it with your team or another leader who might need it. We see you, even in the work no one else notices, like reworking how you bring motivation to your team. But even those small moments make a big impact. You're not doing this alone. We are here and we are cheering you on every step of the way. I'm so glad we got to spend this time together on the Female Church Leaders Podcast. I hope you're walking away encouraged, equipped, and reminded that your calling truly matters. To keep growing, join us for our next Closing the Leadership Gap cohort at closingtheleadershipgap.com. It's a guided coaching experience, including live Q&A with me, designed to accelerate your leadership journey. If this podcast has been helpful to you, would you please take a moment to follow, rate, and share it? Your engagement helps the algorithms suggest our resources to female church leaders we haven't had a chance to meet yet. And don't forget to follow at Female Church Leaders on Instagram for encouragement and leadership tools designed just for you. You can also follow my personal feed at Kadi Cole, spelled Kadicole. Keep leading faithfully, keep growing your leadership gifts, and I'll see you next Monday because Sunday is coming and you are going to be ready for it.